Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Educator Wellness Revolution podcast. I am your co host, Gracie Obahovich, and I'm very excited about today's episode because we're diving into something that I've noticed for a while in working with educators is that when we talk about educator wellness, we can't not talk about student wellness. When we talk about student wellness, we can't not talk about family wellness. And I'm always really hungry for the spaces where we can talk about the connections between those. So I'm very grateful for the group that we put together today, which is represented by parents, educators, and students in the DC system to really dive into a topic that's very important and hard to solve for, which is student anxiety. And what does it mean to be a student right now in this world that we're living in? And how do we really support students and support ourselves? So to help facilitate this conversation, we have you're kind of like a guest co-host, Megan. She's been a guest on the podcast before, and I'm going to let her introduce herself and then take the conversation away.
Thanks, Gracie. I'm Megan McCormick. I'm a clinical psychologist and I'm the co-founder and director of programs for the MedStar Georgetown Center for Wellbeing in School Environments, or the WISE Center, and an associate professor of medicine at Georgetown. And I'm happy to be here. So I'm gonna have you guys introduce yourselves. We've got two parents joining us today. Of course, you are more than parents, but you're representing parents today. Um, if you guys will tell us just a little bit about your kids and what schools they go to. So I'll call on Tara first.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tara Brown. I'm a proud parent of a 18, almost 19-year-old. She graduated from Friendship Collegiate Public Charter School in 2025, and she is currently a freshman at Georgia State University, and she wants to be a teacher. So I'm excited about that.
Oh man, I'm from Georgia, so lots of applause there and lots of applause for becoming an educator. Even more applause for that. Thank you, Tara. All right, Andrea.
Hi, yes. My name is Andrea Jones, parent of four. My oldest, she actually just turned 21 last week. She graduated from KIPP, DC College Prep in 2023.
Amazing. And you've survived. You've survived four children, so
Oh man, still surviving.
still
Still,
surviving.
still.
Yeah, still surviving. Okay. And so we also have two wonderful educators with us. So I'll ask you guys to just tell us what your role is, what school you're from. Devon?
Hi, my name is Devon Montgomery, and I am the Dean of Students at Harmony DC Public Charter School.
All right. Thanks for being with us. And Alphonse.
Hello, my name is Alphonse Prince. Currently, I'm the algebra teacher for Center City Public Charter Schools, but will be transitioning to a new role of assistant principal starting at the end of this year.
Cool. Thanks, you guys, for being here. And we also have two youth voices, Daniel and Naomi, who will be joining us as soon as they get battery power and find a quiet place. Queen, would you like to also introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Queen Lee. I'm a co-student at GW.
Okay, scratch that. We'll edit that part out. Sorry, Queen. Queen is also joining us, and she is a GW doctoral student and the lead of the DC COMBS Youth Leadership Council. Okay, so I'm gonna just kick off by asking you guys some questions. And the first one is just in observing as a psychologist, I observe this, and many of us are. Anxiety just seems more prevalent these days in all of us, and especially in our youth. And so I would love to hear from you guys, just how does anxiety show up these days for your scholars in particular? So let's start with the parents. Either of you can jump in. Just tell us, how does this show up in the kids that you see around you?
Okay, I'll go. So when my oldest was in high school and going through those high school years, the tensions were high. There were a lot of things that I noticed with her, and it's more than just like I'm nervous to talk in front of people type of anxiety. It was like the forgetfulness, the fatigue. It was just a lot of these things that I was noticed that was really out of character for her. So um, it was important to me to like really understand what was going on with her during those high school years.
Yeah, and it sometimes is those high school years that really bring these things to the surface, right? Because there's so many other pressures too that are happening in those years. Tara, what about you?
Well, when my daughter was in middle school, she was actually diagnosed with severe social anxiety. So like it was like a condition. And so by the time she got to high school, I mean, she went through the pandemic and, everyone was online. And she entered back into the building in 10th grade. And by 11th grade, she came to me and she was just like, Mom, I can't do it anymore. Like just being around all of those people and in classroom settings, it was overwhelming to her. So luckily, Friendship has an online option. So I brought her back home for the rest of her junior and her entire senior year. But it can be crippling, even as much as uh, her fear of speaking or talking in front of other people. When she had questions in class, she wouldn't ask. She would just fail. And so it's a really a difficult thing to navigate because it's constant and it's every day. Just even talking with the guy who's dropping off the Uber Eats, or if she says the wrong thing or she thinks she says the wrong thing, she spirals, and it seems something small, but it's really really big to her. So.
Yeah, wow, that's so impactful on families, and it's because you're there in every one of those moments where this is playing itself out. And you kind of mentioned how this was showing up at school for her, which is a good transition to ask Alphonse and Devon, how do you guys see anxiety presenting in the classroom? We've heard a lot of things so far, just about kids shutting down or not even being able to participate in learning.
Yeah, and so as a math teacher, I definitely see anxiety show up in math class a lot. And sometimes it comes from all sides. And so for me, I just I try as much as I can to help the student navigate it, and work through it within the context of the content. So if we're learning math, all right, and using the example of asking questions, like I would push the student to try to ask questions in class, but not too far. But I would definitely go to them and we'd work out a system, just because I want students to be themselves, but then understand how to do what they need to do for themselves. And me as a teacher, I'm the one who jump through all the ropes and the hoops to get them what they need. So if I got two students who are just don't want to ask questions in class, great. You let me know. We work on a system where you don't understand something, you put up a finger or even raise your eyebrow. Something that lets me know, and it could just be our thing that you have questions, and then I go help. Because I just try to think about when students get done with 12th grade, they're 18. And if they don't have the tools to help themselves with these things, I've, I haven't applied for a job in a while, like a new job, but I've yet to see like interviewers or jobs come in and be like, hey, tell us if you have this disability. They don't act like they can't ask, but if our students never get the opportunity to say that they have this and then own it and try to work through it, when they get out of school, they don't know how to do that. And then that kind of exasperates the anxiety that they have. Oh, now I got to get a job because I'm supposed to get a job in life, but I don't know. I don't like being around people. So how do I navigate that? And for me, part of being on this podcast is to hear things to use with the students because math anxiety is not going away anytime soon.
Yeah, I'm sure that so many of us can agree with this statement that we wish there were more educators out there like you, just who were so committed to really helping shape young people by being sympathetic to where they are and providing these accommodations and also pushing them to be better, which I think is a really important balance. And I'm going to circle back to that when we start talking about solutions that we found or helpful strategies. I want to come back and ask you more about what you've been doing in your classroom. Devon, how do you see anxiety showing up in your classroom, in your school? What does it look like?
Working with elementary school students, it looks a little different because they don't always have the tools to kind of name what's going on. I think a lot of what I've seen is it represents itself in kind of low self-esteem where students kind of have negative self-talk about not being able to do certain things, or there'll be work avoidance where they kind of will shut down before trying because a lot of the younger friends kind of want to get it right the first time and don't want to kind of have to go back and do all the mental lifting of kind of editing things. And so a lot of times it might manifest itself where a kid is just sitting there not starting, um, or kind of saying negative kind of self-talk and that kind of thing. Or there's a lot of deflection, right? And so there's stuff that we can kind of do to give kids structured breaks and kind of help them with chunking assignments and that kind of thing, to kind of reinforce things. But yeah, just a lot of communal kind of work to kind of get through those things.
Yeah, and you're bringing up something that is coming to me in part of the second question I wanted to approach you guys, which is about the challenges that you've faced in supporting scholars with anxiety. One of which might, I think when you're talking about younger kids is just even knowing which ones have anxiety, right? Because a lot of times I work deeply in schools, as my whole team does, and especially in younger kids, but even in older kids, sometimes anxiety looks like that classic thing of like holding back and being shy. And sometimes it looks like acting out and throwing things and being aggressive. And that can also be manifestations of anxiety. So anxiety can look like lots of different things, especially in these younger kids. So yeah, sorry, did you want to say something about that, Devon?
I mean, I'm sure that we're gonna hit it later, but yeah, like you kind of hit it on the head when you talked about the aggression, like not the aggression, but like the more outwardly kind of way to show that too, and kind of figuring out is it because of X, Y, and Z. And it's hard to kind of tap into the actual root of what's going on. But
Yeah.
yeah, well, I guess we'll hit that in a bit.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's what I kind of want to talk about. So let's go back to the parents. So, um, Andrea, in your experience, what challenges did you face to just understanding what was going on with your daughter and helping support her?
Yeah, to your point, like it wasn't like a typical like when I think of anxiety, I think of like these different again, not being able to socialize and things like that. And it wasn't showing up for my daughter like that in high school. It was showing up where she couldn't get out of bed in the morning. She really loved science. She was in AP biology and she was doing well, and then she wasn't. And we really couldn't figure out like the why. So um, it was really challenging because I didn't know what to look for at that time. Like I didn't know what to name it to get the support she needed. And and we now know what it is and like working, through that. But it was very challenging, because I'm like, is this a serious thing or just teenage angst or hormones? But I soon realized it was more than just like teenage, the teenage hormone kind of thing. This was very serious where she would be in bed for days because of her anxiety.
Yeah. What about you, Tara? Seemed like there were some similarities there.
Yes. Honestly, I kind of got a break because she was diagnosed early, so I knew what to call it. So, my biggest challenge actually was me and learning to be patient with things that I didn't think was a big deal, and trying to put myself in her place and understand that it was the biggest deal and that I needed to treat it that way. And not to diminish, because someone, I just remember one example where she went to the door to get the Uber Eats. You know how sometimes when you think somebody's going to say something, so you say something in response. So she said, "You're welcome," before the person said thank you, and that was a terrible. Like she was so upset for a good amount of time. And I'm thinking, you do that all the time. Like that's really not a big deal. Like no one's life is going to change. But I had to learn to to be patient and to try to put myself in her shoes Instead of, I've been on this planet for 51 years, she has only been here for 15 minutes comparatively. And little things that seem little to me were really, really big to her, and I needed to treat them as such.
Yeah, man, that's such a big thing that happens in families where kids have anxiety, and it's so muddied sometimes with child development, right? Because kids get upset about a lot of things that grown-ups know logically are not big deals, and so we can kind of do that to kids sometimes. Hey, it's not a big deal, but you both are talking about these things that are really the distinction between normal anxiety and where we kind of get into the world of anxiety disorders. And that's, we all experience anxiety. Anxiety is something we should all have. It keeps us safe, it gets us motivated sometimes. So a little bit of it is okay, right? But when we're talking about something else, when we as clinicians think about anxiety disorders as debilitating, meaning that we can't do things that we want to do, right? We're not able to function like we were before or like we want to, and that it's pervasive, meaning it happens in different settings. It's not just, oh, with that one person, they make me really anxious, but like, this is happening to me in different settings. And also that it's distressing. It really bothers the family, it bothers the child. And all three of those things are kind of how we distinguish the normal human experience of anxiety with what we would call an anxiety disorder. I mean, there's evidence out there that we're all experiencing more anxiety, and largely that's because we can avoid a lot of things that we used to not be able to avoid. And avoidance is one thing that can perpetuate anxiety. So, for instance, like if social situations make us nervous, we can scroll on our phone at a party rather than talking to new people, right? Or if we have a conflict with somebody, it's a little easier to ghost them than it would be in the past, right? And so a lot of this is stuff that people are thinking about and talking about in terms of why youth seem to be experiencing more and more anxiety, in addition to just all the things that they're holding and all the information they're exposed to. Is like we also just have great ways to avoid, and avoidance sometimes gives rise to or makes anxiety a little worse. And it's just important to think about whether or not anxiety is getting in the way of people being able to live the life that they want, and to seek help for that. And again, it's not about curing anxiety. We always talk about it like turning down the volume on anxiety, is sort of where we want to go. Daniel and Naomi have joined us, and we're so happy to have you, Daniel and Naomi. And this is a great time for you to come in with your perspective if you guys are in a good place to talk, because we've just been talking to parents and educators about how anxiety shows up in the kids around them and what the challenges are that kids face when they're experiencing anxiety. So, do either of you have any thoughts to contribute to that conversation?
I'm so sorry. Can you repeat
Yeah,
what you said about?
let's start with the first one. How does anxiety show up for you or for your classmates, your friends? How do you see anxiety kind of manifesting or presenting itself?
As far as like in schools or
Yeah, in
anywhere?
school and the way people interact with each other, in friendships and in life. Like, how do you see people struggle? What does it look like when people are struggling with anxiety?
Okay, I can use myself for reference. I mean, I have some peers who struggle with anxiety. Um, I know for me, my anxiety, it makes it hard for me to interact with my peers or like anyone really. So I would just like, for instance, school. I know when my anxiety is really bad, I like physically cannot go into the school building or be around too many people. It's just too much. I have a friend, and his is pretty similar to mine. Like his anxiety, he with his anxiety, he literally cannot come to school. Like it's very bad. So I've seen it in cases like those. In other cases, maybe they just, they're not as social as they normally would be. So, yeah, like that. Can you
Yeah.
guys hear me clearly?
Yeah,
say?
we sure can.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks,
Okay.
Naomi, for that perspective. I think it's really important that you're mentioning that this idea of socializing, because it's such an important thing that people your age are doing and want to do and need to do as part of their development. And that's one of the big ways that you see that that getting in the anxiety getting in the way is not being able to go to school or go hang out, do these things that we might do normally as teenagers. What about you, Daniel?
Right, I'll say it from the perspective of what I've noticed. I've noticed that really future, for example, Virgin School, their future really makes people really tense since the way many people see it is that one small error could just make or break your future. I've noticed that they feel kind of as if they were on this glass pane that's so fragile, and any mistake it just breaks and everything you've worked for is gone. So I've noticed that they tend to be very tense, very specific about things related to their academics because it kind of is, either make or break it.
Yeah. And I'm hearing that there's this additional challenge of just what it's like to be an adolescent in this day and time where there's so much pressure, and school doesn't always feel like a place where it's just fun and welcoming and everybody's excited to go. There's a lot at stake, and everyone's asking you to think about your future and to do everything perfectly. And it feels like there's a lot of competition, and all of that really drives up this experience for people. Um, yeah, I'd love to thank you guys for giving your voice on that. I'd love to go back to our educators in the group and just hear from you a little bit about what are the challenges that you guys face in identifying or supporting, like knowing who the kids are that need that support, and then supporting them in the classroom. Specifically, just because you are often managing a classroom of lots of kids, and being an educator is a stressful job. So what are all the things that play into just the challenges you face in supporting students with anxiety?
I mean, I'll jump on first. I think for me, it's working with the kids to figure out what part of the anxiety is something that they can manage, and then what part of it is something where we need to bring in professionals. And the reason for that part is just if it is anxiety, well, not if it is anxiety. Once we recognize it is anxiety, this is something that they're probably going to have to figure out how to manage throughout their lifetime. And so for me, like I still get anxious as things. For me, I use it as a way to make sure that I've done everything that I'm supposed to do in preparation for whatever event, class, teaching, leading a PD, etc. And so for me, I recognize that by the time they get to me in eighth grade, they have some sort of math anxiety, whether it be of their own volition or whether it be they've heard the public, I'll just say the public, downplay math, downplay learning math, downplay all of these things in math. So for me, it's just about listening to them and the the building up the honesty. I can't think of the word, but the rapport with them so that they know that like I'm here to teach you math at whatever your level is. Everybody's a math person, not just, oh, this person always gets all A's in math. They're a math person. I'm not because I got to struggle to get the C. It's more of like we're working through how you learn. We're working through, you know, what gives you anxiety? Is it the math that's giving you anxiety? Is it the fact that you think I might call on you that's giving you where is it at? And I do that recognizing sometimes they might not have the tools to immediately answer that, but it's more of a start thinking about it. Start giving them the tools to advocate for themselves because then, when they get to high school, they might need to tell the teacher, hey, I have anxiety in math class when you call on me without prompting me.
Yeah.
That might be the thing. And so then once I know that, then I work with them of like, all right, that's cool. And then, because I'm trying to get them to grow, it might be all right. So what would be the best case situation for you to embrace that? And they might not have it. But for me, it's all about like getting them to understand what's going on with them so they can advocate for themselves when they're around people who are not keeping as watchful of an eye, like, oh, they never speak in my math class, but then I go to ELA, they talking hands up, et cetera, et cetera. So if teachers aren't doing those things, how to make sure kids know how to do that for themselves so that they can get everything that they need to get, but also not become over anxious and stressed out and all of those things. And sorry for taking too.
Yeah. No, you've made excellent points. And two things that are coming out for me of what you've said is like, um, it's hard to get people who are feeling anxious to talk about their anxiety, right? That's like a sort of inherent in the whole thing is that there might be some anxiety even in just thinking about it or talking about it. And so you really have to develop that relationship with kids to earn their trust so that you can actually go there. And then you also mentioned just our own anxiety also plays a role in all of this. And we see that in families, we see it in classrooms, we're all co-regulating, right? So we have to be aware of ourselves well as others. Devon, what do you think? What are the challenges that you face in supporting scholars' anxiety?
I think that something that I've noticed with educators in general is that there's already a lot on our plates in terms of content teaching and other kinds of things that oftentimes that stretches our capacity to be able to kind of have the bandwidth to support with those other kind of things. And then part of it too is that when we think about with like our younger learners, thinking about how do we also prepare them for dealing with things on their own when they're kind of coming into things. And so we kind of think about and struggle with what kind of supports to put into place that aren't denying them the ability to have that useful struggle, right? And so it's hard to kind of figure out sometimes when is it okay to let a student sit in something a little bit longer or providing them the space even to have a break in your space or to put in some kind of support for them. Sometimes there's that fear that you're doing too much so that they're not doing their own regulating, and kind of figuring out how can we strike the balance with actually giving them some of those tools that they can then use on themselves, but also finding the bandwidth where we're in systems oftentimes where we want kids to advocate for themselves, but then when they advocate for themselves around the wrong person, that doesn't get received often. And so I often find too that there's this split where in a classroom you need to kind of have kids that respond in a way where you can do something immediately, but then you want them to have the space to advocate, and those often come at odds. And so trying to figure out how to balance that space where you give the kids the tools to speak up for themselves, but like also have the room to honor that.
Yeah, man, you're naming something that I think is just really inherent in the struggle around anxiety, which is um, finding that that balance between empathy and understanding and accommodation and um, and confidence. And we talk about this a lot in clinical care with families, with kids themselves, with educators. It's like we have to do both. We have to both take that, that get in the mindset, like Tara was saying, get in the mindset of where our child is, understand that it does feel really bad for them and that this is a big deal. And it might not feel logical to us, but we have to be there in it with them a little bit. And then we also have to give them the confidence to be able to face some of the things that make them anxious, so that they can learn to push past that themselves and their brain can sort of relearn some of those anxiety triggers. So this is a really hard thing to do. And I find, as a school-based clinician, I find that a lot of the accommodations that we kind of automatically put in place for kids who have anxiety actually don't do both of those things. Sometimes they reinforce anxiety more. Sometimes they're too hard. It's not accommodating enough. And it's a really hard thing to do, and something we like to work with schools around. Naomi and Daniel, I'd love to ask you guys, what do you think adults misunderstand about anxiety in youth? If anything comes to your mind, what do you think that adults misunderstand about anxiety and how it shows up in scholars?
Oh, hold on. Okay, I know for me, I don't when it comes to like adults and like the topic of anxiety, for instance, my mother, I just think she is like she's just not familiar with not how it works necessarily, but like, you know, how it can look in certain, and you know, in certain people, and like how it shows up in certain ways. I think that's the main thing, like how it shows up, whether that being sleeping in, like getting to school late, or like not cleaning, or not doing things you know, um you typically do, you know, just like changes. um I think that I think that a lot of times, um, like my parents blame, and they don't like go, they don't really target the root of like problems when it comes to like anxiety. I don't know. Anxiety is like a tricky thing. Yeah, that's all I got.
Yeah, Naomi, that's fab. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think you're 100% hitting the nail on the head. You got a lot of nodding heads here too, along with you. I mean, parents are kind of primed to like yell at their kid or say get off your butt when they're refusing to do something, and that's and so we're all as parents, sometimes we're just in that frame of like, oh, my kid's refusing to do something, or they're sleeping in, or whatever, they're being lazy, they're being, they're talking back, or they're refusing to do things, and that's just normal behavior. And it is really tricky because those are also ways that anxiety shows up in lots of kids. And so it can be a really hard thing for parents and teachers to come around to sometimes. Daniel, what do you think? Is there anything that you'd like to add to that? Just what adults kind of misunderstand about anxiety?
Mm. Something that I'd like to add that I believe that some staff at schools who tend to try to solve this misunderstand is the root cause of anxiety. So something I've noticed is that based off of what I know, right, the average student, the high school student, nowadays doesn't just take normal classes. Over 50% of them actually takes at least some sort of advanced class because we were taught that, hey, if you're just doing the bare minimum, you're not doing enough. You have to push yourself. So then most students try to push themselves to take an advanced class, and then that causes extra pressure on them because, hey, if I can't do this advanced class, then there's something wrong with me. That's the thought that always gets brought up. You should be able to do this. If your peers can do that, you should too, which is personally one of the things I've hated the most because I really believe that each person has their own specialty and what they're good at. And no student is going to be able to excel in all classes. For example, myself, I love math and science, but I'm a horrible writer. No matter how hard I try, I'm not gonna excel in something that I know I'm not good at. But then there's always that pressure that, hey, to go to a good college, you have to have straight A's, a 4.0 GPA, great extracurriculars. But that's just not realistic. You can't expect a child to take advanced classes and then expect them to excel even in things that everyone knows that they're not good at, that they know themselves that they're not good at. So it just pressure built onto pressure, and now all they think about is, hey, I have to be better at this. I have to be perfect. So then it just spirals out of control.
May I
Yeah,
add on to? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
please. No, please go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, like adding on to what he said, I you know, there is a constant, like there is this big expectation when it comes to school specifically for like teenagers, or all kids in general, even young adults. There's an expectation, get good grades, come to school on time, go to college, get a good job, So, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I personally do not like when people expect little out of me, but when there's like a line, when you're like expecting too much, and that, like, for me personally, like, I was before I was like diagnosed with like depression and anxiety, my grades were like excellent. Like, I would get no lower than a B in middle school, and like a little bit after like all that, obviously they started dropping a little bit, nothing too crazy, but you know, and the immediate response from like family members is, "Hey, what's going on, Naomi? You can do better than this," rather than trying to, like getting on me about me not doing good enough rather than like helping me. And that pressure, like how he said, it really like pressure and like the idea of someone judging you, that really really worsens anxiety, at least for me. I'm like speaking 100% through my own perspective. um yeah, that like that absolutely makes it worse. So I just wanted to agree with what he said.
All right. If I can add one more thing, sorry that we've been talking for a little while. All right.
Please. Yeah.
Um, in addition to that, for example, myself, my school really pushes advanced classes. Actually, one of the requirements of even graduating is to take at least two AP courses. And in addition to that, a thing about I've noticed in my class at my school, teachers, they teach their class as if every student there loved that subject, as if to even excel in that class, the student would have to really subject to focusing on that specific class, which is once again not realistic when you have 8 classes to take. So I was actually talking to my English teacher about a couple weeks ago, and he said that to stay on track with the current curriculum that we have for that class, we have to spend hours outside of school preparing for that, actually being practicing and being able to understand what he teaches. But then we can't do that for other 7 classes. In addition to that, we have extracurriculars, which is also something that gets pushed because it adds to your uh, to where you're applying to college, it adds to your resume. So all this stuff that you feel forced to excel in, you just can't because there isn't enough time to be able to excel in all those things.
I just want to jump in here and say thank you so much to Daniel and Amy for sharing that. And you're actually making me you're really bringing back a lot from my high school experience. I'm not quite sure what grade you all are in, but I remember when I was a junior, my jaw locked and we went to the dentist and like finally we figured it out. It was like I was grinding my teeth at night because of like the course load that I was taking and the like pressure that I felt. And so much of that pressure was like, I remember like adults being like, college, you got to get to college, you have to do well in college. And actually, when I got to college, it was like the first time in my life I felt like I could take an exhale. And I could remember that it was like this whole thing that people have been pushing me so hard on that I like had been like literally been like having bad sleep over was just so I wonder why we do that. And just like I just feel a lot of like empathy for what you're saying and just, I wish we wouldn't do that to kids.
Yeah.
So
I'm
I
wondering.
wanted
Oh,
to
go ahead.
jump
Yeah.
in because I wanted to ask the two students, do you guys feel like you have a teacher that you can talk to that gives it to you straight, like gives it to you, like really lets you know what's gonna happen at college and applying for college? And the only reason I ask that is from DC, I went to Banneker. So I know all about the AP IB push. But I just had a teacher who was just like, hey, calm down. This is the important thing. Sorry, I stepped
um
outside for a second. But and I guess I just kind of wanted to know, do you guys have access to not even a teacher, an adult who gives you kind of not the school quote unquote version, because the school version is yes, get all A's, but the real life version that says, hey, if you get an A in an AP course and you take another course, and let's say you get a B, it still doesn't affect um your GPA as much. So I'm just wondering, do those conversations happen for you guys? And if not, what is a way that we adults can help those conversations happen to like lessen the anxiety of it? Because hearing you guys talk, I can understand like that's a lot just hearing you talk about it. So thinking of not only like just going forward or putting things in place so that that doesn't continuously happen.
I feel like there are a couple of teachers. They don't kind of just come out and say it, but you if you go to them, I feel like they would definitely, like let you know, like, don't worry about it too much, but also don't give up. But it's like it's a very tricky thing because, like at my school, Eastern, they push you to get 32 credits. So it's like, and it's like no, like I remember my freshman year, like right before I even entered the school, we had like orientation. and they were like, she was making it seem like if you didn't get 32 credits, then like you cannot like graduate, but not true, obviously. They really put a lot of pressure because they don't want kids to, I guess, get too relaxed to the point where they're like they don't like they give up and they stop trying. Um, but I guess it would be kind of helpful to like let like young people know that like it's okay if you don't like excel at something, but like also don't give up, you know, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, one of the things that I'm thinking is, I mean, I don't know how old any of the other adults on this call are, but I had the privilege of doing my entire childhood without social media. And, I think that there is this role to play of of like relative comparisons, like what we call it in the psych biz. But it's like, this idea that we're always comparing ourselves to each other. And it's not just you guys that are using social media and influenced by that perspective. It's the adults around you too. And there's I don't think that any of us really realize that, especially the adults sometimes, but I know that it does impact the way that all of us are thinking, and putting pressure on kids is like, and kids putting pressure on themselves is just, you have so much information now. You have access to seeing what people's lives are like all over the world. And it automatically puts pressure on us to be perfect or to have our lives fully queued up. Like I have heard kids who are teenagers say, if you haven't specialized and developed your brand by the time you're 18, like you're out. And I'm like, wow, what is life about? If I don't even want to know what my brand would have been when I was 18. I mean, it's so I think that there is just so much pressure just societally also that just weighs on youth and weighs on the adults around them, that plays a role in this too. And that's a huge gap. I mean, you guys are the first generation in a way that's being raised with all of that going on in the psyche of society. And it's brand new, and I don't think people are handling it too well. So
All right, I would
Tara,
like to.
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Mm. So I was gonna just first add on to that and then answer the previous question. I was gonna say that I agree. Like even myself, so I try to balance multiple extracurriculars. Yet I always wish I could have more time to focus on each individual one. And I've seen people who only have one and they spend all their time focused on that thing. And I just sometimes wish that I could just have the time to really dedicate a good part of my day to the extracurricular. For example, my school offers we have a FRC robotics team. We have a rocket team that actually pretty sure we went to states. And I just wish that I just had enough time to actually focus and make an impact in all of those extracurriculars that I'm part of. So it just feels like there's so much that you have to do to prepare, and there isn't enough time. And back to the previous question, I have talked to many teachers and staff, and actually I personally talked to someone in my school who used to be a college admissions, used to work in a college admission office. And I talked to them, and they really told me that at this point, everyone takes advanced classes, everyone has high GPAs. So now what matters is not just about the cumulative GPA that you received, but the classes that you took. So, for example, if you're planning on doing engineering in college, having a B or let's say a 3.0 GPA in a physics class is way more valuable than having a 4.0 GPA in an AP biology class. So now it goes to having to know what you want to do and really focus on that years and years before you even start applying to colleges. So now you have to, at the start of high school, you have to decide, hey, this is what I want to do so you can get into that path, or then it's too late and then you have no record before you start applying to colleges. So you're just another kid with a 4.0 GPA, just another out of the bunch, nothing that makes you special. So then there's just so much greatness has been pushed to students that that greatness has become just common. So then, what do you do to just stand out and really show what you love and what you want to do with your life?
Wow, that quote, so much greatness has been pushed to students that greatness is common. And I think that that is so powerful. And that sits with me really hard. Another thing I hear you saying is like, it, you have to do so many things just for the resume, just to put it on paper, that it prevents you from being able to actually deeply engage in things to where you feel like it's meaningful and purposeful. And I think this is another reason why we're seeing a lot of struggle with mental health issues, is because we're just skimming the surface on a lot of things to build the resume. And this is a really hard place for kids to be in. We're so appreciative of you guys sharing your perspective, because this is the best thing about this podcast today is hearing from you guys. I want to come back to the parents in this group and just hear your reactions to what Naomi and Daniel are saying, and in particular, any things that you have found helpful in supporting your own students with anxiety.
Yeah, what they said really resonates because my daughter was in AP classes as well. In high school, she wanted to be a veterinarian, so she thought taking the AP biology and all that. And then she got to school and like these things started manifesting and she wasn't able to complete school and she had to come back home because um, it just wasn't safe for her to be there. But I often think I always take mental health seriously. I've always have, because I have, lots of people in my family, things that have mental health challenges. Um, but I think like with anxiety, it's just not taken as seriously. And it's almost it's become like a common where, oh, I have anxiety. Like, people kind of use it kind of casually instead of like really understanding how anxiety manifests to the point of like, again, my daughter she was struggling when she got to college because, you know, I feel like if we would have been able to get her that support sooner, which was a struggle within itself, because even as I am slowly learning about these things, finding community support and even finding somebody in the school to kind of support her was a really big challenge, which that challenge kind of grew into college. And she still did not have the support. And ultimately, you know, she's back home. I mean, now like we have the diagnosis, we have the support. So she's going back. Um, she's going back to UDC. So I mean, that's great. But I just really wish that people will not take anxiety so lightly or just be kind of like, oh, you'll be fine, like really dismissive of it because the word's been used so much, but really understand how it can affect someone's life. And it really affected her life. And I just really wish I had more resources and support to really help her, make it over into the college era. But, everything's a learning experience. I've supported her through the high school, even with me not understanding the diagnosis. I still supported the manifestation of the diagnosis through high school. And now we have a diagnosis, and I'm supporting her through that as well. But yeah, I hope that, more parents are not as dismissive of it and really understand like it's like with all diagnoses to me, it seems like a lot of them are just like a spectrum. So, you have some that, it could just be a nervousness to not talk out in class to something that could be debilitating. So I constantly work to like learn more about it through her, learn more about the diagnosis itself, and really, you know, want to share with other parents like, hey, this is not just oh, it's just nerves. Oh, you're just nervous. It's just anxiety, So that
Yeah, that there's so much good stuff in there. Tara, what do you think? What have you found is helpful for supporting your kiddo?
Well, the first thing I thought of was the actual diagnosis. And as soon as she was diagnosed, but before I forget this, because my brain, Anxiety is rarely by itself. It's usually best friends with depression and a bunch of other things. And anxiety feeds into the one issue, and then the depression feeds into anxiety. Like it's just like they they feed off of themselves. But before, as soon as my daughter was diagnosed with severe social anxiety and clinical depression, the first thing I thought of was I went back to all of the times that I parented her badly because I did not know that it was anxiety that I was looking at. So all of the times that I was like, so that lady is talking to you. You look them in the eye. You're being rude. You're not. That's not polite. Pay attention. Like all of those things that I said, and I thought I was being a good parent. Trying to prepare her for the world and how to interact with people, and I was actually harming her. So now, whenever I talk to parents, if you get two parents in a room, you automatically have a support group. Then we start talking about our kids and, what they're doing and, how they're getting on our nerves and, things that frustrate us. I tell every parent that I come into contact with now is get them checked. Just make sure it's not anything medical. Just make sure it's not depression. Make sure it's not anxiety. That way, because once I learned that my daughter had these issues, I then had to understand how to parent through them. There's certain, there are just certain ways that you have to interact with children with those things. And I think Naomi talked about a messy room. Now, I was raised by a Marine. Rooms couldn't be messy. They just couldn't be. And so I had that same mindset. But my daughter's therapist was like, got to pick your battles, man. Like a messy room is usually an indication of what's going on in their brains. So, you gotta let that be, and focus on other things. And so as soon as you, as a parent, can understand what's actually going on with your kids, then you can learn and be a better parent in that process. So I've learned how to deal with a messy room for the most part, not anything too crazy, but I've learned how to deal with things and also understand, like, there's sometimes when she's going through something that I have to back off. Like, this is not the time to say take out the trash because she is, she's having, an issue. And so what has helped me the most is understanding that there might be an explanation, and it's not just laziness. It's not just, they're just being obstinate. It's not just they're being difficult. And once you understand the explanation, then it can help you understand how to parent better. And that's the thing.
It's such good advice. And I hear you both talking about having community support, having medical support and therapeutic support, and just being, as adults, being willing to still grow and change. And that these are such important things. I want to kick it to Devon and Alphonse. Can you guys tell us just two or three things, one to three things that you have found helpful as educators with students who have anxiety?
I think for me, finding out, what calms them, and without singling them out, creating that space in the classroom for that type of calming. So like if someone is, all right, they count down from 10. Well, in my lesson, before we do the lesson, or if a problem that I know is going to be very hard for them to work through, before or after, let's center ourselves again. Let's bring it back. Let's take a deep breath. Um, but then just for me, what has worked is learning what helps the student. And again, for advocacy ways, I try to tell the students to, uh, advocate for themselves, because what I tell them is what helps you, what question you have may also be going through the mind of one of your peers. And since I can't read minds, like, you guys have to, like, answer the questions, or I can come up with the acts, but you have to give me some, or not have to. I would like for you to give me some answers to help us work through this, because we're in this together. And I'm a math teacher, but I'm really just an educator. And whatever comes across my desk at that day is what I hope to help them learn. And so if it's learning about being empathetic, about learning how to work with people who go through different things than you, then I should have to model that. And I have to model that with them learning about them and all those different things.
Wonderful perspective. Devon, what do you think?
I think first of all, just like naming oftentimes that that they're having some big feelings and whatnot can be helpful for the younger ones who might not be able to put a name to kind of what they're struggling with, but also making the space for them to be able to advocate for what they need and having not necessarily, give them that space to kind of honor that for them. I think another thing that I've noticed as well is giving space to students to have trusted adults within the building and understand that sometimes there might be somebody better situated to support them in a space than myself. And so utilizing some preferred adults to kind of, give them breaks to kind of, give them a little pep talk here and there has been very helpful. Also, sharing stories with them because like the younger students, I notice a lot of times that they're anxious about something with how they ask me questions. So they might say, "Hey, Mr. Montgomery, have you ever felt this way before? Have you dealt with this, or how do you deal with X, Y, and Z?" And oftentimes sharing stories, making up stories that kind of could kind of give them that support can be really helpful for them as they're processing and trying to figure out, hey, how do what would be a good way for me to kind of navigate through something. Sharing experiences really helps with them as well. And then also asking them questions, like asking them kind of to process their thoughts a little bit, kind of helps the younger friends as well.
Man, such a big fan of stories for young ones, especially. Even if you make them up, it's the way kids process the world, and it really gives them distance from talking about themselves and really seeing it in other people. It's so important. And Alphonse, you bring up something that is so important about, and all of you, just about how we're not singling anybody out on anxiety, right? Like we're saying, let's face this together. This is a communal thing that we're doing together. So it's not just you in the corner trying to figure out what works for you. It's let's share how we all face anxiety and how we all feel calmer. And you're not just doing it reactively, but you're doing it proactively and trying to manage the anxiety of the classroom together, which is a great way to um, to to be able to teach lots of kids and contribute to the social and emotional growth of lots of kids at one time. So I really appreciate all of that. Daniel and Naomi, I'll ask you guys this question now. What have you done, or what have you found helpful for uh, helping make your own anxiety feel better, or working collectively with the people around you to improve anxiety? What works for you guys?
I would just say I think what works for best for me is like I really like sensory toys. Um, Now some of my teachers they're a little not nice, so they do not like allow them in their classroom. My English teacher, unfortunately, like I don't understand it. Luckily, I have like a note from my therapist that says, "Hey, like this is on my like a safety plan I have. Like, hey, I need these, or like this is useful." Also, I don't know when if like I'm at like a bad point when it comes to my anxiety. I think alone time is best. However, hmm, alone time, maybe like supervised alone time so that like nothing, um, that I'm not doing anything that I'm not supposed to be doing, but definitely alone time, or just hanging out with someone that listens. I know that's a nice thing. I think somebody had said something about like giving them the space in my middle school. We had this whole space that were like all the school's counselors and stuff sat in. It was really nice. There was couches, there was air conditioning. There was a lot of rooms. It was really nice. Obviously, there's nothing like the closest thing we have to that is probably like the senior suite, but that's for the seniors only. So not for me for a while. But yeah, giving like children, teenagers the space, especially in schools, because that's where they spend most of their time. A space to like go and manage their anxiety, calm down, reflect. Um, yeah, like that. I think that's extremely helpful in sensory toys.
I love it. And sensory choice. I just want to note that any adults out there listening who think the kids don't know how to put boundaries and limits on themselves, like Naomi is proof in point. She's like, oh, I want alone time, but wait, alone time might not be the best thing for me all the time. Or with this, I mean, you guys, you're the ones we should be listening to on this stuff. So thank you so much for sharing that. Daniel, what do you think?
So me personally, for something that I've noticed that not many people, have done is I knew what I wanted to do with my life since a very young age. I know I want to do something with my hands, but I also knew that that journey doesn't start at the start of college. It starts many years before. So I've revolved my whole life around preparing for this. I spent, I believe, 2 years picking out specifically what high school I was going to go to so that I could take the specific classes that I was gonna need to do what I wanted to do. So I felt like I had to be over prepared, but then I noticed that it was too much. It was too much to handle. So I took a very large decision for myself, and I decided to leave the idea of going to college because I noticed that all of that stress, pressure, and over preparation that kids tend to do for a career that they want to do, it's not always needed. At least I believe that I don't need it. So I've noticed that I will most likely, or decided that I'll most likely be doing trade school. I love to work with my hands. I need to do something with my hands. I cannot stay still and just sit in a desk and stare at a computer. I've always found the need to move around, which, by the way, I've been walking in circles this whole time because I can't stay still while I'm doing something. So I always have the need to do something, to have something going on, which is also another reason why I am not very good in some specific subjects. But that leads on something else. So I've just really spent a lot of time thinking about decisions, not just what be the best for my future, but myself in the moment. But yeah.
Yeah. It's to me, it's coming back to something that Alphonse said earlier, which is um, just kids having access to adults that will check in with them about how all this is feeling for them and not just apply pressure, but have honest conversations about, is this too much? What are you feeling? All of that. And also just to provide some realistic information about the real world. Not everybody has to go to four-year college. Not everybody, you want to do something with your hands. There are lots of options out there to where we can all kind of, I'll never forget the moment that a professor did that for me, and they described it as stepping off the treadmill. And I think that that's a really nice metaphor. It's like you've just been on this treadmill, and then somebody gives you permission to step off of it, and all of a sudden you're like kind of released from that pressure a little bit, and it opens our minds up to be able to see lots of different alternatives. So I just, I hear from all of you, relationships, 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 and communication, feelings awareness, and just a lot of empathy and shared understanding about what this is like for the youth that are going through it. I'm so grateful to all of you for coming, for being vulnerable, for connecting and being honest. And you are the experts on this kind of stuff. And I hope that this has been a learning opportunity for all of the listeners. I know it has been for me. With the last 5 minutes we have, I'll just say that um, I am putting together a resource sheet, and we can attach that to the podcast, however that works, so that can put some resources on there that everyone on this podcast can also contribute to. But there are lots of resources out there, everything from something called space training, which, when I hear Tara and Andrea talking about the struggles to learn how to parent a child who has anxiety, that's exactly what it's about. It's about taking the parent experience and and shaping it into something that works for kids who have anxiety, and not pushing too far in that one direction of being too tough or too far in the other direction of being too empathetic, and trying to find that middle ground. There's a lot of asynchronous resources as well. I mean, like websites where youth themselves and parents can go and do kind of self-paced online things that help improve our coping and our resilience to anxiety. There's a lot out there, and there's a website I'm going to link in this about a website that specifically has resources for parents, for students, and for educators, talking about exercises and accommodations that you guys can put in place for students with anxiety. But there's a lot of resources out there, and a lot of and I'm also going to add in there some strategies that I'm not going to have time to really go through today. Things that we use in therapy for youth that have anxiety or people that have anxiety, everything from separating out that feeling of fear with what's dangerous. That's one of the things that we have to our brain has to learn to do, right? Is to say, just because I'm feeling scared, does that mean that this situation is dangerous? And if not, can I be curious about that? Can I do two things at one time? Like, can I be scared and brave at the same time, right? Not every time, but sometimes we need to do that. Things about exposure, which is a big part of treatment with anxiety, which is basically facing our fears, but in this really small, gradual way that allows us to work up to and practice the things that our brain has learned to be scared of and to avoid. And then something called worry time, which we've got. Wise has a video that you can use for yourself, for your family, just learning how to set aside time every day at the same time to worry, because worry is not bad, and we don't want to do away with worry altogether, but we want worry to happen on our terms. And so this is a strategy that you can use to kind of get your brain in the habit of keeping that anxiety contained, and then opening up your brain for 10 minutes in the evening to worry more productively. And it can also help facilitate sleep a little bit for folks who have difficulty with sleep because of worry. But all of this is written up in the resource document. If anybody has any final words of wisdom or any closing statements, I'll give everybody the floor for the next 2 minutes. But thank you all for being here.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's one last thing I wanted to mention. I had like totally forgot. I think that when it comes to teenagers, at least I can speak from my perspective and like my sisters. When it comes to like mental health resources, I I feel like we need more, or like for instance, like with the psychiatrist, when I go to the psychiatrist, I practically told him nothing, and he was just so quick to like prescribe me stuff, which granted it's their job to just prescribe, but they just like mass like prescribe you with things that like sometimes it's like very like just not beneficial whatsoever. I think that instead of like rushing to put people on things, like I got prescribed with like anxiety medication, but um it would put me to sleep, and it would keep me to sleep, so I would like it would be so I could not wake up, and so I was getting to school so super late trying to manage my anxiety and whatnot. And I bring it back up in our next session, and I get nothing. I don't get a follow up, nothing changes. So I and something similar happened with my sister, but I'm not going to get into that. I just think that more time needs to be put into our young people. But that's all I got to say. Thank you
Yeah,
guys for having
more
me.
resources. Thank you, Naomi, for that. And Tara, were you about to say something?
Yes, I apologize that it's off topic just a lot, but to the algebra teachers Center City, you guys are doing amazing things with math. I'm so proud
Thank
of you
you.
guys.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I
Thank you for
appreciate
saying
it.
that. Hey, there needs to be, it's a great way to end, actually. Just sending love to all of you guys. This is a special group of folks. I'm really happy to have spent this time with you. And thank you for all you're doing, just inspiring other parents, inspiring other educators, and inspiring other youth to be upfront with this, with what they're experiencing, and to tackle these things head on. So please look for the resources so you can find good support. Feel free to reach out to me, and I will direct you to trusted folks, and we'll get you what you need. But we're all in this together. Thank you guys for being here.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Megan,
Thank you
for
guys for
leading us in this
Thank you.
conversation. And I really appreciate us ending on appreciation and advocacy. And I do agree that like there's a lot of work that actually has to be done in shaping our school behavioral health system. And that's work that that we need you in. So if you are listening and you're passionate about this topic, we need you at the hearings. We need you to be pushing harder on this. And I think that that is like a really amongst the many other amazing strategies that have been offered. We will share them in the show notes. I think also showing up to advocate to change the system can be an amazing form of therapy as well, because it is a public health issue. It's not an individual issue that we're all swimming in this water. And we can't really identify that unless we come together for conversation. So thank you so much to Tara and Andrea, our parents, for being here. Thank you to Devon and Alphonse, our educators, and a special huge shout out to Daniel and Naomi, our youth, for being here and sharing and being brave and curious. All of us, I think we're all probably a little anxious at certain points on this call, but thanks for being brave and curious together. So, all right. Thank you all so much. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
you. Have a good
Bye.
one.
Have a good one.